Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. Today is Wednesday, the 12th of February, 2025. I'm Gianni DePoci, your host, and we are joined this week by our Wyatt Fellows. Wyatt, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you back on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Johnny. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. Today we had a pretty volatile start to trading in stocks. We had that inflation report come in hotter than expected. And that's why I'm really excited to have you on today because you are the grain master. You analyze, all the grains for us here at MMA, and obviously commodity prices have a big impact on inflation. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But let's start off with stocks here. Take a look at the Dow. It's really amazing when you consider the geocosmics of the day. You had the moon in Leo. We just had the full moon. Sun's in Aquarius. Sun was square Uranus. So, you have the moon in the sign ruled by the sun. We had that really violent reaction of the CPI reading this morning, but so far we're back up to pretty much where we opened in the Dow Cash Index. So, Wyatt, let me ask you this. What do you make of this tape in stocks right now? Do you think we're in a danger zone, or do you think we still have some more upside to go here?
I really think we have some more upside, and that's just based on the cycles, longer term cycles that we've analyzed at MMA. With stocks, the Dow in particular probably being in a new 50-week cycle. I think we got a chance at new highs, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to see how we've kind of spun our wheels here over the last couple of weeks near the highs, and usually that's pretty bullish. I mean, it's kind of interesting when you look at the geocosmic lineup over the next couple of weeks. It's pretty quiet until we have Mars going direct on the 26th of February. I believe that's that Sunday. That's the 23rd, excuse me. So we have Mars going direct, but really until then it's kind of quiet. And then you have Venus going retrograde on March 1st, which we know can move markets quite a bit. And obviously Venus is a pretty important planet for grain. So let's cut to the chase and we can look at some other stuff in just a moment, but I know that's kind of your specialty. Let's start off with corn. I'm using that corn fund instead of the spot price because it's not updated as of today. So what's your take on grains? I can go ahead and zoom out here for a better perspective. So do you think we've bottomed here, or are we going to chop around some more this year?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty convinced now that August of last year, that low on the chart you got there was some longer term lows in the grains, and corn has been leading the way higher. Discounting, obviously, we know that futures markets are discounting mechanisms. So I can't help but feel like something's coming down the pipe at some point over the next 12 months. But corn bottomed in August, soybeans bottomed in August, as did wheat. That was a really big geocosmic period for the grains with that first Jupiter Saturn waxing square. And wheat was been a dog a little bit, but it's starting to catch up now. So I am cautiously optimistic on grains heading into the summer when we have some potential. Things have to line up, but we have some potential for some adverse weather due to geocosmics and natural factors lining up. But they got to line up to transpire.
Well, I know that it was something that you discussed quite a bit at the MMA investment retreat in Lake Bled back in September, and it's really timely now because you're talking about those lows that are holding from back in August, and you were talking about the significance of those back in September as well. So, do you want to touch on those potential weather events and what you're seeing on the geocosmic front? Because I think our viewers would be interested in that.
Yeah, so I did a longer term study and I presented it at the investment retreat. So we have the coming Saturn-Neptune conjunction in February of 2026. Now, when I looked back, that had a very high correlation to severe droughts over, in this case, the study was on wheat in wheat producing countries, Russia, US, that had a severe effect on the supply of wheat. And we always had a low and we would run up within a year, 1 to 3 years of that aspect. What's interesting is that Saturn Neptune conjunction comes within 1 degree this year, this
Yeah,
summer.
Yeah, so it could
So
start this year. Yeah.
yep, and we have a lot of other aspects like Jupiter Neptune square happening at that time. That we could be in for some dry weather here in the springtime and summer in the U.S. and or over another crop producing area of the world. Like Brazil is growing their second crop corn at that time. And then obviously you have Russia, Ukraine, which is one of the largest exporters of wheat to the world. So.
It's a breadbasket of Europe for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting too. I'm glad you brought up Jupiter square Neptune that we're going to have. I think it's in June, if I'm not mistaken, because those are the two planets that rule crude oil. And I'm going to take a look at USO here. Actually, I'll even zoom out and look at the crude oil chart itself. This is a market that has been trading within basically a $20 range for the last 2.5 years. And as long as we hold these lows, I think right now we're kind of in a sweet spot where inflation may not be the biggest threat unless you start taking out above like $80 in oil on crude oil. But I think we're in this sweet spot, where if we're above, 64, $66 in crude oil, you have the oil producers, that can still make money, but it's not a big inflation threat yet. So, you mentioned Neptune being in the conjunction with Saturn. Neptune obviously being the co-ruler of crude oil makes me wonder if that fits into the puzzle. Crude oil, very important for the agricultural process, not just for the gas you put or the diesel you put in the tractors, but also the fertilizer, all nitrogen and natural gas derivatives that all plays into account. So how does crude oil fit into your picture here, Wyatt?
Yeah, well, it's funny you ask. I just had a conversation with Puyan yesterday, actually, who you've had on to this channel before. Um, I think the March and May back there in 2023 was the start of a potential new 4-year cycle, 44-month cycle, that I believe is what he analyzes. But we really haven't gone anywhere yet.
Yeah.
We're just marking time. So I think from a trading perspective or longer term, I think you're pretty well defined with those lows at 63, $64 in the crude. And like you said, we start punching above 80. I think we may get a continuation if one of those levels are broken.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm kind of playing it here. We're kind of in no man's land right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of a Goldilocks scenario, like I said, and it's interesting when you tie in the interest rates to that. Bonds are getting hit hard today. Um, but it's amazing because you had that uptick in the inflation report. I'm not entirely too concerned about it just yet, mainly because we haven't seen grain prices start to run yet. We haven't seen crude oil prices start to run. Um, I know you're not in the poultry business for the eggs, but I know the price of eggs, that was one of the highest items on the inflation report. Um, so do you have any insight you can offer us on that, being in the agricultural world? I know there's been, a lot of bird flu concerns and a lot of culling happening, so there's the supply is low. And also in the cattle,
Yeah.
I can actually pull that up real quick. The herds are at multi-decade lows, if I'm not mistaken. So we had an absolutely amazing run in cattle prices. And I think it's something we should keep an eye on here in the near term because we have Venus going retrograde on March 1st. And you remember the conversation we had before, Wyatt, about you mentioned about the kind of the life cycle of the cattle with the Venus retrograde. Would you share that with our viewers? Because I think they would really like that.
Were you talking about as far as when, like how long it takes for them to get to market?
Yeah.
Yeah, so usually um, when you have a animal and you raise them for meat or slaughter, it takes about 18 to 22 months for them to get to market weight. And then I brought that up to you, and what did you say? Or what
The
you
Venus
had?
retrograde cycle.
Yes, Venus retrograde cycle. So we kind of both were like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So, yep. And the thing I wanted to point out with cattle, and he actually asked your opinion. So that spike high we got hit there happened with Venus direct, I believe.
It
Um,
might have been Venus. I think
or
it
no,
was
excuse me, Uranus direct.
Uranus. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Well, Uranus is in the sign of Taurus,
Right.
and it is set to leave Taurus when? Do you?
Yeah, it's in the next couple of months. It makes the initial ingress into Gemini. I believe it's in May.
Yeah, and obviously Taurus is the sign of the bull. So I'm kind of wondering, like we've been up. Once Taurus leaves, does that, blow off period happen in cattle? And do we start heading down? It's just something I've thought about. And
Well, you raise a really good point because we have discussed in the past the relationship between feed prices and cattle prices. So if you have feed prices starting to bottom now,
yes,
start to see grains move higher, that's going to impact cattle prices. You'll probably start to see them taper off.
yes, yes.
Very interesting stuff. Wyatt, let's talk about gold and silver too, because you've been analyzing gold absolutely on a tear here. Gold, I don't think it hit a new all-time high yet today again,
Nope.
but silver is starting to come to life. So let's talk about gold and silver. What are you looking at in these two metals right now?
Yeah, so gold, like you said, has been on a tear, and ever since bottoming in November, that was probably its 50-week cycle low, and it should be bullish in the first primary cycle, and it has been.
Yeah,
We're getting later in the primary cycle, so kind of looking for a primary cycle crest. Ideally, in my opinion, I'm looking for that last week in February, first week in March, around the Venus retrograde period. That's kind of where I'm looking for a top in gold, at least in the near term. Silver is much younger in its primary cycle, and is we had that hot CPI report today, and after an initial sell-off, markets are clawing back here today. So
yeah,
they kind of are getting that drift that you did is with crude oil. Do they really believe it or not?
right.
So, but yeah, I think what I would look for, or what I'm personally gonna be looking for, is now that silver's maybe catching up a little bit, maybe we see some diversions between those two metals in the next 2, 3 weeks coming
Yeah,
up.
yeah. That's what I'm looking at as well. I do think that there's some good upside potential in silver in the near term.
Yep,
I'd like to see it take out that high from last year. Otherwise, that could be a big warning sign for
yep.
what's happening in gold. Let's talk on Bitcoin and Ethereum here real quick. Uh, any insights or anything you're looking at in this market?
I'm not. I gotta be honest with you. I trade Bitcoin very rarely. So I don't have a huge insight, although I think we're pretty late in the primary cycle on Bitcoin, are we not?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the question is whether we had this primary cycle low here on February 3rd. That could have been
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, we are late. We are late. Either that low holds or we have probably one more and then we're back off to the races.
I think that, I mean, we got some pretty big diversions with Ethereum, don't we?
Yeah, Ethereum's been hit really hard and I think we're falling into a 14-month cycle low here.
Oh, yeah.
I think that might have been it. So,
Okay.
yeah, it looks pretty good. So, well, Wyatt, that's all that I had to review with you today. Tell us a little bit about your grain report because I know that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's coming out the last week in February for the February issue. Um, so anybody that's interested in catching up on grain cycles or where we could potentially be headed this year and into early next, I touch on that in that report. Other than that, the corn's already moved, but soybeans and wheat. Oh, one quick thing on the soybeans. We did alert subscribers in the weekly that we could be headed for a half primary cycle low here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Venus rules soybeans,
Yeah,
retrograde period coming up March 1st, and we took out last week's low. So I think that's what's transpiring there. So we could get a steep correction here in soybeans.
good to know. All right, Wyatt. Well, thanks very much for joining me. And just to let everyone know, we did just publish the February edition of the monthly Cycles Report, MMA's flagship service and publication for over 40 years, where we've updated our outlook on stocks, bonds, commodities, currencies, and more. We're also going to have Vibka held on here in the next couple of weeks because Vibka is starting the MMA Tech Report. And so she's going to be sharing her research with you on that. Definitely encourage you to come check that out because it's a very exciting report and a very timely one as that. And this weekend, going into next week, we will be issuing the monthly Shanghai report. And I don't know if you've been keeping track at home, but very, very exciting developments happening over in the Chinese equity market. So we're going to be updating our subscribers to the China market on that note early next week. So that's all for now. Last thing, of course, we're going to have the Cosmic Convergence Conference in Orlando, Florida, March 7th to March 9th. The whole MMA crew is going to be there for the most part. Wyatt, are you going to make it down there?
Well, actually, I think I'm trying to move some flights around. I may try to get in for the first 2 days, but then
Awesome.
I gotta fly out. But hopefully, I'll be able to catch up with people.
Great. All right. Well, looking forward to reconnecting with you and the rest of the MMA team. Hope to see you guys there as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you same time, same place next week.